when a proudly conservative man's MAGA hat triggers an unexpected confrontation at a busy mall, he finds himself caught between defending his beliefs and exposing a deeper truth about political intolerance. His composed response to an increasingly hostile situation leads to a shocking revelation that changes everything. Richard Thompson never expected his red MAGA hat to spark a mall confrontation that would expose the ugly face of political intolerance in his quiet suburban community. The 54-year-old hardware store owner adjusted his cap as he walked through Eastbrook Mall with his teenage daughter Amy on what should have been a routine Saturday afternoon shopping trip. After 25 years running his successful business in town, Richard was used to occasional disapproving glances at his conservative views, but he'd always handled them with quiet dignity. "Dad, can we check out the new phone cases?" Amy asked, pointing toward the electronics store. "Mine's getting pretty beat up." Richard nodded, absently touching the sturdy case on his own phone. The one with the discreet security camera he'd started carrying after similar confrontations had become more common in the news. The mall was packed with weekend shoppers, their chatter echoing off the high glass ceiling as families browsed store windows and teenagers lounged by the fountain. He first noticed the young woman at the coffee kiosk, her face twisted in obvious disgust as she spotted his hat. Even from 30 feet away, he could see her hands trembling with anger as she raised her phone to start recording. Richard recognized her from local social media, Sarah Matthews, a self-proclaimed progressive activist known for her inflammatory posts about conservatives. "Look who's spreading their racist propaganda at our mall," Sarah announced loudly to her phone camera as she approached, her voice dripping with contempt. Several nearby shoppers turned to stare. Another old white Republican who thinks he can just parade around wearing symbols of hate. Richard felt Amy tense beside him as Sarah drew closer, her phone thrust forward accusingly. He placed a gentle hand on his daughter's shoulder, maintaining his characteristic calm even as mall security guards took notice of the brewing confrontation. "Young lady," Richard began evenly, "I'm simply shopping with my daughter. We can disagree politically without—" "Don't you young lady me, you privileged bigot," Sarah cut him off, her voice rising further. "People like you are what's wrong with this country. Why don't you take your Trump-loving hatred somewhere else?" More phones emerged from the growing crowd of onlookers as Sarah's rant continued. Richard noticed the mall's security cameras swiveling to focus on their location, even as he kept his expression neutral and his voice steady. "I have every right to film you spreading your hate," Sarah declared, stepping even closer while keeping her phone trained on Richard and Amy. "My followers need to see what we're up against in this town." Richard felt his daughter press closer to his side, her discomfort evident in her trembling hands. He maintained his composed stance, but shifted to better shield Amy from Sarah's invasive filming. "Ma'am, I respectfully ask that you stop filming my teenage daughter," Richard stated firmly, his voice carrying across the now hushed corridor of onlookers. "Your issue appears to be with my political views, not with her." "Oh, now you're trying to play the concerned father?" Sarah scoffed, her voice rising higher. "After supporting policies that tear other families apart? You're probably just another privileged business owner who doesn't care about working people." Richard noticed a mall security guard speaking into his radio while watching the situation unfold. Several shoppers had formed a loose circle around them, their phones recording the confrontation from various angles. An elderly couple shook their heads disapprovingly at Sarah's behavior, while a young man in a business suit appeared to be taking notes on his phone. "Actually," Richard replied calmly, "I employ 35 people at my hardware store, including several immigrant families. We offer full benefits and—" "Save your white savior routine," Sarah interrupted, taking another aggressive step forward. "I've got 5,000 followers who are going to love seeing this MAGA racist get exposed. You're about to go viral, old man." A middle-aged woman in medical scrubs stepped forward from the crowd. "Miss, That man donated supplies to our community clinic last month. You don't know what you're talking about. Sarah whirled toward the nurse, her phone now swinging wildly between targets. Oh, great. Another enabler. Anyone defending a Trump supporter is part of the problem. I'm documenting all of you. Richard placed a gentle hand on Amy's shoulder, noting how his daughter's initial fear was shifting to embarrassment as Sarah's rant attracted more attention. He spotted a mall security supervisor approaching with 2 additional guards, their faces concerned but professional. Young lady, Richard tried one more time, his voice remaining steady despite the escalating situation. I'm happy to have a respectful discussion about political differences, but this public harassment needs to stop, especially when it's affecting my daughter. Harassment? Sarah laughed, bitterly, her voice echoing off the mall's glass ceiling. I'm just getting started. You think you can walk around promoting fascism and not face consequences? My followers are going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. The growing crowd murmured as Sarah's behavior became increasingly erratic. Several onlookers had their phones pointed directly at her now, rather than Richard, documenting her aggressive approach and hostile demeanor. The security supervisor was only feet away, speaking quietly into his radio while assessing the situation. Sarah's hand suddenly shot out toward Richard's MAGA hat, her fingers grasping at the red brim. Richard smoothly stepped backward, maintaining his composure even as his daughter gasped beside him. Do not touch me, he stated firmly, his voice carrying across the now silent corridor. The mall security supervisor immediately quickened his pace, hand moving to his radio. Or what? Sarah sneered, her phone still broadcasting. You'll call your MAGA friends? I'm sure my followers would love to see that. She glanced at her phone screen, reading comments. Look, we've got over 200 people watching this racist get exposed right now. Richard noticed several store owners emerging from their shops, their faces concerned as they observed the escalating situation. A teenager wearing a Best Buy uniform had his phone pointed directly at Sarah, while an elderly couple whispered to the security supervisor, gesturing at Sarah's aggressive stance. How dare you indoctrinate your daughter with these conservative values? Sarah's voice rose sharply as she shifted her attack. Teaching her to hate immigrants and support fascism? What kind of father does that make you? My political beliefs include supporting legal immigration and individual liberty, Richard responded calmly, keeping himself between Sarah and Amy. The Constitution protects everyone's right to express their views peacefully, including yours. The Constitution? Sarah laughed mockingly, her live stream capturing every moment. Another white man hiding behind a document written by slave owners. She turned to address her phone directly. Everyone watching, this is Richard Thompson of Thompson's Hardware on Oak Street. Let's show him what happens to businesses that promote hate in our community. A middle-aged man in a business suit stepped forward. I've seen you before, he said to Sarah. You're Sarah Matthews, the one who organized that boycott of Johnson's Bakery last month because they wouldn't make a political statement. Richard's eyes narrowed slightly as he processed this information. The bakery incident had made local news when a small business was targeted by coordinated harassment campaigns on social media. That's right, Sarah declared proudly, her chin lifting. And we shut them down. Just like we're going to shut down every business that supports the MAGA agenda in this town. My organization has over 5,000 followers ready to take action. The security supervisor finally reached their position, flanked by 2 additional guards. Ma'am, we've received multiple complaints about harassment. I need you to lower your voice and stop filming, or you'll have to leave the premises. Oh, so you're protecting the oppressor now? Sarah's voice grew even louder as she backed away slightly, still filming. Everyone watching, the mall security here is defending a MAGA racist. Share this stream. Get down here. We need to show them we won't stand for this. Richard could see several young people entering the mall's main entrance, phones already out, clearly responding to Sarah's call for backup. His daughter's hand trembled as she continued recording, but her voice was steady as she whispered, "Dad, I'm getting all of this." The situation was rapidly spiraling beyond a simple confrontation, and Richard could feel the mounting tension in the air as Sarah's supporters began to gather, their hostile glares and raised phones creating a digital wall of intimidation. The mall corridor buzzed with nervous energy as more of Sarah's supporters arrived, their phones held high like digital shields. Richard noticed security speaking urgently into their radios, requesting additional backup as the situation spiraled beyond their control. "This man and his hate symbol need to be removed," Sarah shouted to her growing audience, both online and in person. "Thompson's Hardware supports fascism. Let's make sure everyone knows it." Her voice echoed off the mall's tiled floors, drawing even more attention. A store manager from a nearby clothing boutique stepped out, phone in hand. "I just got 3 threatening calls demanding we ban MAGA hat wearers," she reported to security. "They're saying they'll organize boycotts of any store that serves them." Richard maintained his position, standing straight but non-threatening. "My business employs people of all backgrounds and political beliefs," he stated clearly, making sure his daughter's camera captured his words. "We've been serving this community for 20 years without discrimination." "Lies!" Sarah spat, her face flushed with anger. "Everyone watching, start calling every business that works with Thompson's Hardware. Check their supplier list online. We'll cut off their inventory sources." The crowd had swelled to nearly 30 people, with Sarah's supporters clustering together, phones recording from multiple angles. Other shoppers hung back, many filming the scene while whispering among themselves. Richard noticed several familiar faces from the local business community, their expressions troubled as they witnessed Sarah's escalating threats. "Dad," Amy whispered, her phone steady despite her nervousness. "The mall's Facebook page is getting flooded with negative comments. They're saying we started this." The security supervisor stepped forward again. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. You're disrupting business and making threats." "Oh, so you're choosing fascism too?" Sarah cut him off, spinning to face her live stream audience. "The Oak Valley Mall supports MAGA racism. Screen record everything. We'll make this go viral." Richard watched as several store owners hurriedly made phone calls, clearly concerned about their businesses becoming collateral damage in Sarah's crusade. The elderly couple who had spoken to security earlier approached a local news crew that had just arrived, gesturing animatedly as they explained what they'd witnessed. "Your time is over," Sarah declared, pointing accusingly at Richard. "The days when people like you could spread hate without consequences are done. We're going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are and what you stand for." A young man wearing Sarah's organization's T-shirt rushed up to join her. "The downtown group is mobilizing," he reported excitedly. "They're heading to his hardware store right now to start a protest." Richard's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained steady. "Everything happening here is being recorded from multiple angles," he reminded them, "including your threats against my business and your attempts to incite harassment." "It's called accountability," Sarah shouted back, her followers nodding in agreement. "And we're just getting started." The tension in the air was electric as more security personnel arrived, trying to maintain order while Sarah's group grew increasingly bold in their confrontational stance. The situation had transformed from a simple shopping trip into a powder keg of political animosity, with Richard's calm demeanor standing in stark contrast to the chaos swirling around him. The mall's security team formed a loose perimeter, but their uncertain glances betrayed their hesitation to directly confront Sarah's increasingly aggressive group. Richard noticed how they kept looking toward the main entrance, clearly waiting for police backup. "Everyone watching the live stream, flood the mall's social media," Sarah commanded, her voice sharp with authority. "Tag their corporate office. Make them explain why they're protecting this MAGA fascist. Richard's daughter Amy pressed closer to his side as Sarah's supporters tightened their circle. "Look how he's trying to act innocent while hiding behind his kid," one of them sneered, his phone camera pushing uncomfortably close to Richard's face. "Sir, please step back," Richard said firmly, maintaining eye contact with the man. "You're making my daughter uncomfortable." His calm tone carried clearly through the tense atmosphere, captured by dozens of recording phones. A middle-aged woman shopping with her teenage son pushed through the crowd, addressing the security supervisor. "I have the whole thing on video, from when that young woman first started harassing him," she stated loudly. "They were just shopping when she started screaming about his hat." Sarah spun toward the woman, her face contorted with rage. "Another sympathizer. What's your name? Where do you work?" Her followers immediately turned their cameras toward the witness, who stood her ground. "That's exactly what I'm talking about," the woman replied steadily. "Threatening people for simply telling the truth about what we all saw." More mall customers began speaking up, sharing their recordings with security. "I've got it from when she first spotted him," one man called out. "She was on the phone organizing people to come here before she even approached him." The security supervisor's radio crackled. "Police are 3 minutes out," a voice reported. Sarah's expression flickered with uncertainty for the first time, but she quickly recovered. "We've got your business address," she announced, holding up her phone to show Thompson's Hardware's website. "Your Google reviews are about to get very interesting. And wait until your suppliers see how many people are contacting them. You're documenting your own harassment campaign," Richard pointed out calmly. "Every threat, every attempt to organize attacks on my business, it's all being recorded from multiple angles." A small group of store owners had gathered near their shop fronts, phones out, carefully documenting the scene. The mall's property manager arrived, speaking urgently with security while examining the situation. "The exits are that way," Sarah's aggressive supporter pointed, moving to block the opposite direction. "Take your hate symbol and get out." "We're not leaving until police arrive," Richard stated firmly. "You've made multiple threats. This needs to be properly documented." His steady refusal to be intimidated seemed to further enrage Sarah's group, who pressed closer despite security's warnings to maintain distance. Through the mall's glass doors, police cruiser lights began flashing in the parking lot. The atmosphere crackled with tension as Sarah's followers exchanged nervous glances, suddenly less certain about their position as law enforcement approached. Through the mall's front doors, 4 police officers entered with purposeful strides, their presence immediately shifting the dynamic of the confrontation. Sarah's live-stream followers began backing away, some lowering their phones while others continued recording with newfound intensity. "Officers, this man has been intimidating and harassing people with his hate symbol," Sarah called out, her voice carrying across the atrium. Several of her supporters nodded vigorously, though their previous aggressive posturing had notably diminished. The mall's property manager stepped forward, tablet in hand. "We have security footage of the entire incident," she stated professionally, "and multiple witness statements indicating this woman organized a targeted harassment campaign against a peaceful customer." Richard stood calmly, one hand still reassuringly on Amy's shoulder. "I'd like to press charges," he informed the officers. "I have witnesses and documentation of multiple threats against my business and personal safety." The woman who had spoken up earlier approached the police, her phone extended. "I recorded everything from the beginning." She spotted his hat and immediately started calling people to come harass him. Then she threatened to destroy his business. Sarah's face flushed as she frantically scrolled through her phone. "Look at my live stream comments. People are supporting us because they understand the danger of allowing these symbols of hate in public spaces. Ma'am, organizing harassment campaigns is a crime," one officer stated firmly, positioning himself between Sarah and Richard. "We've received multiple calls about threatening behavior and attempted intimidation." Sarah's most aggressive supporter tried backing away through the crowd, but two officers had already moved to secure the exits. The mall's security footage played on the property manager's tablet, clearly showing Sarah's initial confrontation and her subsequent calls for reinforcements. Over 2,000 people watched her threaten my family and business, Richard noted, his voice steady. She explicitly encouraged her followers to attack my company's reviews and pressure our suppliers. The live stream comments continued scrolling, documenting calls for boycotts, personal attacks, and business sabotage. Several store owners stepped forward with their own recordings, providing additional angles of Sarah's escalating behavior. "She threatened me too when I tried to tell the truth," added the witness with her teenage son. "Demanded my name and workplace, trying to intimidate me into silence." The police began taking formal statements while mall security maintained their perimeter, now focused on preventing Sarah's supporters from leaving before providing identification. Through it all, Richard's composed demeanor stood in stark contrast to Sarah's increasingly frantic attempts to justify her actions to the officers. "The law applies equally to everyone," the lead officer stated clearly. "Organizing harassment campaigns and making threats are serious offenses, regardless of political beliefs." The property manager led the officers to her office, where multiple security camera feeds displayed on wall-mounted screens. "We have footage from 12 different angles," she explained, clicking through the timestamps. "It clearly shows Ms. Matthews initiating physical contact when attempting to grab Mr. Thompson's hat." On the main screen, high-definition footage showed Sarah lunging forward, her fingers grasping at Richard's MAGA hat while he calmly stepped backward. Another angle captured her supporters, forming an intimidating circle around Richard and Amy, their phones raised like weapons. "We've had 3 other incidents with Ms. Matthews in the past month," the security supervisor added, pulling up incident reports on his tablet. "She's targeted other customers wearing conservative merchandise, though none escalated to this level." Outside the office, local news vans had begun arriving, their satellite dishes extending skyward. A reporter from Channel 7 interviewed witnesses, including the mother and teenage son who had defended Richard. "She immediately started live streaming and calling for backup," the mother explained on camera. "It was like she had a whole network ready to descend on anyone wearing the wrong hat." Sarah paced near the mall entrance, her voice rising as she demanded attention from the news crew. "You're not showing the whole story. He was intentionally provocative, wearing that symbol of hate to trigger marginalized people." Her remaining supporters nodded emphatically, though their numbers had dwindled significantly. Meanwhile, social media was exploding with unedited footage from multiple angles. A local conservative group shared security camera footage showing Sarah's aggressive approach, contrasting sharply with her edited live stream version. Comments poured in from other local business owners. "She tried the same thing at my coffee shop last month," wrote one. "Demanded we stop serving a customer wearing a conservative T-shirt. She organized a boycott of my bookstore for hosting a Republican author," another added. "Called us fascists for allowing diverse political viewpoints." Richard stood quietly with the police, scrolling through screenshots of Sarah's followers threatening his construction company. "They're already posting fake reviews," he noted, showing an officer his phone, "claiming we discriminate against minorities, though they've never done business with us." The mall's legal team arrived, armed with documentation of Sarah's previous confrontations. "We've received complaints about her filming customers without consent," the lead counsel explained. "She seems to specifically target anyone displaying conservative views." As evidence mounted, Sarah's carefully constructed narrative began crumbling. Her supporters watched uneasily as more witnesses approached the police, each adding another piece to the puzzle of her systematic harassment campaign. The contrast between her inflammatory rhetoric and Richard's composed responses became increasingly stark, captured in real time by news cameras and cell phones. Amy handed her phone to the police officer, showing a series of screenshots from Sarah's social media accounts. "Look at this post from last week," she pointed out. She literally mapped out conservative-owned businesses in the mall and called for direct action against their customers. The officer scrolled through the evidence, his expression growing more serious. "This appears to be part of a coordinated harassment campaign," he noted, documenting the posts. On Sarah's public profile, a network of similar activists shared tactics for confronting conservative shoppers, complete with scripts for filming confrontations. The mall's IT department accessed archived security footage, revealing Sarah's systematic pattern. Split-screen monitors showed her approaching different shoppers over the past months, always following the same strategy: aggressive confrontation, immediate live streaming, and calling in supporters to create crowd pressure. "We've identified at least 7 incidents in the past 2 months, the security supervisor explained, creating a timeline on a whiteboard. Each one follows the same pattern: targeting someone wearing conservative clothing or symbols, then escalating until they leave the mall. Richard watched as more evidence emerged. A store owner approached with printed copies of emails Sarah had sent, threatening to organize boycotts unless they banned customers wearing MAGA merchandise. She demanded we create safe spaces by excluding anyone she deemed problematic, the store owner explained. When we refused, she started posting fake reviews claiming we supported extremism. The local news team had switched their focus, now investigating Sarah's broader campaign of harassment. Their reporter interviewed an elderly veteran who had been targeted the previous week for wearing a Republican campaign pin. "She followed me through 3 stores, he recalled, filming and calling me names until I felt too uncomfortable to stay." Mall management pulled up their visitor conduct policies, highlighting multiple violations: harassment, filming without consent, organizing flash mobs, disrupting business operations, the property manager listed. Each incident represents a separate violation of our code of conduct. Sarah's supporters began distancing themselves as the evidence mounted. One young woman approached the police, visibly upset. "I thought we were standing up against hate," she admitted. "But watching the unedited videos, we were the ones creating a hostile environment." The police sergeant reviewed the growing stack of documentation: witness statements, security footage, social media posts, and incident reports. Each piece revealed another layer of Sarah's orchestrated campaign to drive conservatives from public spaces through intimidation and harassment. Richard's calm demeanor throughout the confrontation stood in stark contrast to the increasingly damning evidence. The security cameras had captured his repeated attempts to de-escalate, his measured responses, and his refusal to be provoked into matching Sarah's aggressive behavior. Amy's revelation triggered a cascade of new evidence. Local business owners, emboldened by the growing investigation, began sharing their own documented encounters with Sarah. A coffee shop owner approached the officers with surveillance footage showing Sarah organizing protesters to block conservative customers from entering his store. "She threatened to destroy my business if I didn't put up no MAGA signs," the coffee shop owner explained, handing over printed copies of threatening emails. "When I refused, her group posted hundreds of fake 1-star reviews, claiming we discriminated against minorities." The mall's security team created a digital timeline on their main monitor, mapping out Sarah's escalating pattern of harassment. Red dots marked confirmed incidents, spreading across the mall map like a virus. Security footage showed her systematically targeting elderly shoppers, families, and veterans wearing conservative symbols. "We've uncovered something bigger," Detective Martinez announced, reviewing data on his tablet. Sarah's social media shows she's part of a funded network called Progressive Spaces Initiative. They receive grants specifically for confronting conservatives in public places. Richard watched silently as more mall employees came forward. A janitor described overhearing Sarah coordinate with others through earpieces, using coded phrases to identify potential targets. A bookstore clerk provided security logs showing Sarah's group photographing customers' license plates in the parking lot. The local news crew, initially drawn by the viral confrontation, now focused their cameras on the growing evidence board. Their reporter interviewed a teenage girl who had quit Sarah's organization the previous week. "They taught us to provoke reactions," she explained, her voice shaking. "The goal was to film conservatives getting angry so we could post edited versions online." Mall management pulled up their visitor database, revealing a pattern of coordinated entries. "They're tracking conservative shoppers," the security chief explained, pointing to timestamp clusters. "When one member spots a target, others converge from different entrances. It's all choreographed." Sarah's remaining supporters watched uneasily as police documented each new piece of evidence. One young man turned over his phone, showing group chat messages where Sarah had planned systematic harassment campaigns against specific individuals. She called it "peacefully making spaces unwelcoming," he said, looking ashamed. The police sergeant organized the evidence into categories: witness statements, security footage, social media posts, financial records, and coordination documents. Each new piece revealed another layer of Sarah's orchestrated campaign to drive conservatives from public spaces through calculated intimidation. Richard's composed response throughout the confrontation gained new meaning as the full scope emerged. The security footage showed how his calm demeanor had disrupted their usual pattern, forcing them to escalate beyond their rehearsed scripts. His refusal to be provoked had inadvertently exposed their entire operation. Mall security converged on the scene with swift precision, their navy uniforms forming a protective barrier around Richard. Chief Williams, the head of security, held up his tablet displaying multiple camera angles of the confrontation. "Ms. Matthews, this isn't your first incident here," he announced firmly. "We have documented complaints from 6 different stores about your group's harassment of customers." The crowd's murmurs grew louder as more security footage played on the tablet. Sarah Matthews appeared in video after video, following conservative-appearing shoppers, organizing groups to block store entrances, and confronting elderly veterans wearing patriotic clothing. Chief Williams swiped through incident reports dated over the past month, each one detailing similar patterns of targeted harassment. "You need to leave the premises immediately," Chief Williams ordered, gesturing to his team. 2 security officers moved to escort Sarah and her remaining supporters toward the exit. Sarah jerked away from their reach, her face flushed with anger. "This is discrimination," she shouted, pulling out her phone to start a live stream. "Security is protecting MAGA fascists. Everyone watching, come to Valley Mall now. We won't let them silence us." Her hands shook as she broadcast to her followers, but her previous confidence had cracked. Store owners began emerging from their shops, drawn by the commotion. "That woman threatened to organize boycotts unless we put up anti-Trump posters," called out Mrs. Chen from the alterations shop. She told her group to post lies about us online. The growing crowd of shoppers shifted decisively in Richard's favor. Several people wearing MAGA hats, who had been shopping quietly now, stood near him in solidarity. A group of veterans, still in their VFW meeting clothes from the mall's community room, formed a respectful line behind Richard. "The mall fully supports our security team's assessment," announced Marina Torres, the mall's general manager, who had arrived to address the situation. "We have a zero-tolerance policy for harassment of any kind, regardless of political beliefs." Sarah's live stream comments filled with supporters promising to protest, but the physical crowd continued turning against her. Local news vans pulled into the parking lot, their crews rushing to capture the unfolding scene. The reporter from Channel 5 was already interviewing witnesses who had recorded the initial confrontation on their phones. "You can't do this!" Sarah screamed, as security firmly guided her toward the exit. "I have rights. This is a public space." She tried to plant her feet, but the officers remained professionally insistent. "Actually, Ms. Matthews," Chief Williams corrected, "this is private property, and we have the right to remove anyone disrupting our business environment. We've documented over 20 incidents of you harassing customers. Mall management has already approved a formal ban." The situation had shifted dramatically from Sarah's planned confrontation to a public exposure of her systematic harassment campaign. Richard maintained his composed stance, watching as the consequences of her actions unfolded naturally before dozens of witnesses and cameras. A local news crew surged forward, their camera lights casting harsh shadows across Sarah's increasingly desperate face. "Live in 5, 4, 3. The reporter counted down, positioning herself between the confrontation and the growing crowd of onlookers. "We're live at Valley Mall, where what began as a political confrontation has revealed troubling allegations of organized harassment," the reporter announced, her microphone ready. "Sir, would you be willing to share your perspective on what happened here today?" Richard adjusted his MAGA hat and spoke with measured calm. "I was simply shopping when Ms. Matthews and her group targeted me for wearing this hat. But it seems I'm not the first person they've harassed." The mall's giant display screens flickered to life, showing security footage from multiple angles. Sarah's face drained of color as clear video evidence played of her following elderly veterans, confronting families wearing conservative clothing, and organizing her followers to block store entrances. "Our investigation has uncovered dozens of similar incidents," Marina Torres explained to the news crew, holding up a thick folder of documented complaints. "We've received reports from store owners, shoppers, and even mall employees dating back several months." Sarah's phone buzzed constantly as her social media followers began questioning her tactics. Comments scrolled past, "This isn't activism, it's bullying," and "You told us these were spontaneous encounters, not planned attacks." 2 more news vans pulled into the parking lot as former members of Sarah's activist group arrived, eager to share their stories. "She made us target specific people," admitted a young woman who identified herself as a former group member. "We were told to provoke reactions, then film only their responses." Security Chief Williams approached the news crew, displaying text messages recovered from the mall's guest Wi-Fi logs. "Ms. Matthews sent these messages today, instructing her followers to make it look worse than it is and capture only the reaction shots." The veterans who had gathered behind Richard stepped forward, one by one, describing their own encounters with Sarah's group. A silver-haired woman in a VFW jacket spoke directly to the camera. "They followed me for 30 minutes last week, calling me horrible names because I was wearing an American flag pin." Sarah's remaining supporters began quietly sliding away, removing their activist badges and disappearing into the crowd. The police arrived, calmly taking statements from witnesses while keeping the growing crowd orderly. "Mr. Thompson," the reporter turned back to Richard, "how do you respond to these revelations?" "This isn't about politics anymore," Richard replied firmly. "This is about treating all Americans with respect, regardless of their beliefs. We can disagree without harassment or intimidation." Sarah's voice grew shrill as she realized her carefully constructed narrative was crumbling. "Everyone, come down here now," she shouted into her phone. "We need to shut this place down. They're silencing progressive voices." But her live stream comments had shifted dramatically. Former supporters were sharing their own stories of being pressured to participate in staged confrontations. Local business owners who had once sponsored her group posted public statements withdrawing their support. The mall's atmosphere crackled with tension as more media arrived, drawn by the developing story of orchestrated political harassment. Security positioned additional officers at every entrance, preparing for Sarah's threatened protest while police continued gathering evidence of her previous activities. The mall's executive conference room buzzed with tension as security footage played across multiple screens. Mall manager David Chen stood at the head of the table, addressing the assembled group of police officers, legal representatives, and witnesses. "What you're about to see demonstrates a pattern of behavior," Chen explained, clicking through security camera angles. "Our AI-enhanced surveillance system tagged these incidents over the past 3 months." The footage showed Sarah Matthews and her group confronting elderly veterans, surrounding families, and blocking store entrances. Each clip was time-stamped and catalogued, building an undeniable timeline of harassment. Richard Thompson sat quietly, his MAGA hat placed on the conference table before him. His daughter Emma, still shaken from earlier events, gripped his hand as she addressed the room. "I was terrified." Emma's voice trembled. "They surrounded us, screaming horrible things at my dad. All because of a hat. I've never felt so scared at the mall before." Police Detective Martinez spread several documents across the table. "We've uncovered communications between Ms. Matthews and a larger organization called Progressive Action Now. These messages outline specific targeting strategies." Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair as her phone lit up with notifications. Her organization's leadership had just posted a public statement. Progressive Action Now denounces the actions of Sarah Matthews and her local chapter. "This behavior does not reflect our values." "Mr. Thompson," the mall's legal counsel addressed Richard, "we've been contacted by 3 civil rights attorneys interested in your case. Similar incidents have been reported at malls across the state." Security Chief Williams projected a series of text messages onto the main screen. "These were sent through our public Wi-Fi network this morning. Ms. Matthews instructed her followers to, quote, make it look like self-defense, and edit footage to show only their reactions." Sarah's face reddened as her carefully constructed world unraveled. "This is a witch hunt," she exclaimed, standing up. "We're exercising our right to protest." "Harassment isn't protest," Detective Martinez replied firmly, laying out printed screenshots. "We have evidence of your group planning these confrontations, sharing targets' photos, and coordinating ambush-style encounters." A representative from the mall's corporate office spoke up. "We're implementing new anti-harassment policies effective immediately. Our legal team is preparing cease and desist orders for known members of Ms. Matthews's group." Local news crews waited outside the conference room, their cameras capturing Sarah's supporters, removing their organization's pins and patches. Several former members approached the police, eager to share their own stories of being pressured into aggressive confrontations. "The truth is," one former member told Detective Martinez, "Sarah told us these people deserved to feel unsafe. She said making conservatives afraid to wear certain clothes or symbols was the goal." Richard finally spoke, his voice steady and clear. "I didn't come here looking for trouble. I came to shop with my daughter. But if my experience helps expose this kind of targeted harassment, then something good can come from this." The evening news broadcasts flickered across screens throughout the city, each station leading with security footage from the mall incident. "Breaking tonight," announced Channel 4's anchor, multiple videos emerge showing organized harassment of conservative shoppers at Highland Mall. Social media platforms exploded with support for Richard Thompson. T-Trinfin, Stand With Thompson, began trending locally as residents shared their own stories of intimidation by Matthews's group. A viral video compilation showed Thompson maintaining his composure while being surrounded, contrasting sharply with Matthews's aggressive behavior. "The thing about Richard," said longtime customer Mary Bennett in a televised interview, "is that he's always been about bringing people together at his store. Politics aside, he treats everyone with respect. This attack on him has exposed something ugly in our community." Progressive Action. Now's national leadership scrambled to contain the damage. Their hastily released statement condemned any form of targeted harassment and announced an internal investigation. Local chapters across the state began distancing themselves, with 3 neighboring chapters dissolving their affiliation entirely. The mall's management team worked overtime addressing the fallout. "We're implementing a zero-tolerance policy for political harassment," announced David Chen at a press conference. "Our security teams are receiving additional training, and we're installing new surveillance equipment to better protect all shoppers." Detective Martinez's investigation uncovered more troubling details. Former members of Matthews' group provided screenshots of private messaging groups where she coordinated confrontation campaigns. One message read, "Target anyone with conservative symbols. Film their reactions. Edit for maximum impact." Thompson's store saw an unexpected surge of support. Customers formed lines around the block, many wearing MAGA hats in solidarity. Local business owners began displaying "We support civil discourse" signs in their windows, a direct response to Matthews's tactics. "We've terminated all partnerships with Progressive Action Now," announced the director of a local youth center where Matthews once held meetings. "Their actions go against everything we stand for in building community dialogue." Sarah Matthews's carefully cultivated social media presence crumbled as followers discovered her deception. Screenshots emerged showing her instructing supporters to provoke and film while claiming victimhood. Her speaking engagements were canceled one by one. An anonymous email to local news stations contained hundreds of internal messages. They revealed Matthews had specifically targeted Thompson's business months ago, writing, "His success makes conservatives feel comfortable here. We need to change that." Richard Thompson received invitations to speak at community forums about political tolerance. "I never wanted to be the face of this issue," he told reporters outside his store. "But if sharing my experience helps prevent others from being harassed for their beliefs, I'll do what's necessary." The city held its breath as Matthews announced a press conference for the following day. Her supporters planned a rally outside the venue, while Thompson's advocates prepared to document any further intimidation attempts. Police increased patrols, wary of potential confrontations between the groups. The next morning, the mall's main conference room buzzed with tension as management called an emergency meeting. Security footage played on the large screen, showing multiple angles of Matthews' aggressive approach and Thompson's measured responses. The room fell silent as the unedited sequence revealed the full truth. "What you're seeing is a pattern," announced Mall Director Chen, clicking through additional footage. Ms. Matthews targeted 3 other conservative shoppers that same day before confronting Mr. Thompson. Thompson sat quietly as witness after witness described Matthews's behavior. His daughter's hands trembled slightly as she described feeling threatened, but her voice remained strong. "My dad just wanted to shop. He never raised his voice, never got angry. He showed me what real strength looks like." Matthews shifted uncomfortably as her organization's president approached the podium. "Effective immediately, Sarah Matthews has been removed from her leadership position," he announced. "Her actions violate everything we claim to stand for regarding tolerance and respect." The police chief stepped forward next. "We're filing harassment charges based on the documented pattern of behavior. Political intimidation has no place in our community." Local business leaders announced the creation of a Respect in Public Spaces initiative, with Thompson invited to help shape its guidelines. The mall adopted new security protocols specifically addressing political harassment, using footage from the incident in their training programs. Thompson's composed resistance had transformed one confrontation into lasting change. His store became a symbol of principled conservative values, with customers from across the political spectrum showing support. Even several progressive leaders reached out to establish dialogue. "This was never about winning or losing," Thompson told reporters afterward. It was about standing firm for what's right, while treating everyone with dignity, even those who disagree with us. Matthews eventually issued a public apology, acknowledging how her tactics had damaged legitimate political discourse. The incident sparked the creation of an annual community forum on civil dialogue, where Thompson became a respected voice for mutual understanding. As Thompson left the mall that evening, his MAGA hat still proudly in place, he passed several others wearing similar caps, no longer afraid to express their views. His daughter squeezed his hand. "You didn't just stand up for yourself, Dad. You stood up for everyone's right to be respected." The security footage became a teaching tool for handling political confrontations nationwide. But the real lesson wasn't in the policies or procedures it inspired. It was in showing how one person's principled stand, backed by truth and dignity, could transform conflict into positive change for an entire community. Thompson's quiet strength had revealed a path forward through America's political divisions, not by shouting louder, but by standing firmer in their convictions while extending respect to all. As he drove home, Thompson smiled, knowing that sometimes the strongest response to intolerance is simply refusing to reflect it.